The city of the Sar Prime burned beneath a red sky. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires across the once beautiful capital. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled. As dark shapes moved through the streets, the screams had stopped hours ago. Now there was only the sound of destruction and the clicking of mandibles. High above the dying world, Commander Vrix watched from the bridge of his hive carrier. His compound eyes reflected the flames below with cold satisfaction. Another world consumed. Another civilization ended. This was the way of the Kefir, and it had been their way for 300 years. Vrix was old by Kefir standards. He had led swarm fleets across 100 systems. He had broken empires and scattered species to the cosmic winds. In all that time, he had never known defeat. How could he? The Kefir were the perfect predators. They moved as one mind, struck as one claw, and consumed everything in their path. Commander clicked his second, a younger warrior named Skef. The harvesting teams report 80% completion. This world's resources will sustain the swarm for another decade. Vrix made a gesture of approval. Good. Signal the fleet. We move to the next feeding ground in 12 cycles. Below them, the last pockets of resistance flickered and died. The people of the Sar Prime had fought bravely. They always did. But bravery meant nothing against the Kefir swarm. Their fleets had numbered in the dozens. The Kefir came with 400 ships. Their weapons were advanced. The Kefir simply absorbed the damage and kept coming. Their pleas for mercy fell on ears that did not understand the concept. The Kefir had no home world. They had consumed it long ago, in the first days of their expansion. Now they were a species without roots, without attachment to any single place. They traveled in their great hive carriers, breeding and feeding, moving ever forward. Behind them, they left only dead worlds and the bones of civilizations. Some species had tried to negotiate. The Kefir listened politely, then ate the diplomats. Others had tried to surrender, hoping to survive as slaves or servants. The Kefir had no use for servants. They had only one use for other species, and it ended in their digestive chambers. In 3 centuries of expansion, no force had stopped them. No alliance had slowed them. The galaxy was simply food, waiting to be harvested. Far from the burning world of the Sar Prime, in a station hidden within an asteroid field, the remaining free species of the galaxy gathered in fear. The chamber was vast and circular, filled with representatives from a dozen different civilizations. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, though the name felt hollow now. Once they had been an alliance of equals, working together for mutual benefit. Now they were simply survivors, clinging to each other as the darkness closed in. Ambassador Yellen of the Soroth stood at the central podium. She was tall and slender, with silver skin and large dark eyes that reflected the worried faces around her. The Soroth were known for their wisdom and their diplomacy. Neither had helped them against the Kefir. The fall of the Sar Prime brings the total to 47 worlds in the past decade alone, she said, her voice heavy with grief. The Kefir show no signs of slowing. Our projections indicate they will reach the Velen cluster within 3 standard months. A murmur of despair ran through the chamber. The Velen cluster was home to 12 inhabited worlds and 40 billion souls. It was also one of the last major population centers outside Kefir-controlled space. What options do we have? Asked the Morthian delegate, his rocky form trembling slightly. We sent the combined fleet to defend the Sar, 200 ships. The Kefir destroyed them in a single day. We could try negotiating again, suggested the Pelian representative, though his voice held no hope. Negotiating with the Kefir is like negotiating with a storm, Yellen replied. They do not want territory or resources or political power. They want to feed. You cannot bargain with hunger. Then we evacuate the Velen cluster, said another voice. Save who we can. Evacuate to where? Yellen asked bitterly. There's nowhere the Kefir cannot reach eventually. We are simply choosing which worlds die first. Silence fell over the chamber. In that silence, a young analyst near the back of the room raised her hand. She was Tessic, barely old enough to hold her position, but her mind was sharp. Ambassador, what about the humans? The question drew confused looks from around the chamber. Yellen frowned. The humans, the species from the isolated spiral arm, yes. They declined Concord membership decades ago, but they must be aware of the Kefir threat by now. Their space is far from the current conflict, but eventually, an older diplomat laughed bitterly. The humans, they are primitives who chose to hide from the galaxy rather than join it. They have perhaps a dozen colony worlds and technology a century behind our own. What could they possibly offer? The analyst has a point, Yellen said slowly. We know very little about the humans. They keep to themselves. Perhaps we should reach out to them, if only to warn them of what is coming. A waste of time, the Morthian delegate grumbled. We need warriors, not warnings. The humans are not warriors. They are hermits. The discussion moved on to more pressing matters. Evacuation routes, resource allocation, the grim mathematics of how many could be saved before the Kef arrived. The mention of humanity was forgotten, a footnote in a conversation about survival. None of them knew that far away, in that isolated spiral arm, something was watching, something was listening, and something was preparing. Aboard his hive carrier, Commander Vrix reviewed the star charts with satisfaction. The Velen cluster was rich with life. 12 worlds meant 12 harvests. The swarm would grow fat and strong, and then they would push further into Concord space. In perhaps 50 years, there would be no Concord left at all. Just the Kefir, spreading ever outward, feeding and growing until they consumed the entire galaxy. It was a beautiful vision. Commander, Sketh interrupted his thoughts. The scouts report something unusual. Vrix turned his attention to the sensor display. Explain. A vessel has emerged from fold space near the Velen cluster. It does not match any known Concord design. One vessel, Vrix clicked his mandibles in amusement. A scout, perhaps, or a refugee fleeing before us. Ignore it. Commander, the energy signature is strange. Our sensors cannot fully analyze it. This gave Vrix pause. The Kefir had encountered many species and many technologies. Their sensors had cataloged weapons and defenses from across the galaxy. For something to be unrecognizable was unusual. Show me, he commanded. The display shifted to show the approaching vessel. It was smaller than a hive carrier, perhaps the size of a heavy cruiser. Its design was angular and dense, built with a purpose that Vrix could not immediately identify. Most ships in the galaxy favored elegant curves or functional blocks. This ship looked like it had been forged in fire and built for one purpose only. What species uses such a design? Vrix asked. Sketh hesitated. Unknown, Commander. The vessel's origin point traces to the isolated spiral arm, the region claimed by the species called humans. Humans. Vrix searched his memory. He had heard the name before, in intelligence briefings. A young species, isolationist, considered primitive and unimportant. They had never posed a threat to anyone, and so they had never attracted Kefir attention. One ship, Vrix said dismissively. If they wish to die defending Velen, that is their choice. We will consume them along with the rest. But something nagged at him, that energy signature, that strange, dense construction. The confidence of a single vessel approaching for 100 Kefir warships. Increase scanner. Sensitivity, Vrix ordered. I want to know everything about that ship before we engage. Sketh bowed and moved to obey. In the distance, the vessel continued its approach. It made no attempt to hide. It broadcast no distress signal and made no plea for assistance. It simply came forward, steady and silent, like a predator that had spotted its prey. On the bridge of that vessel, Captain Elena Vasquez studied her own sensor display. 412 Kefir ships, hive carriers, raiders, destroyers, a swarm large enough to consume worlds. She should have felt fear. Anyone else in the galaxy would have felt fear facing such odds. But Vasquez had prepared for this moment for 30 years. Humanity had prepared for it for over a century. All stations report ready, said her first officer, Commander Chen. Weapons systems at full capacity. Shield generators stable. The crew is at battle stations. Vasquez nodded. Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies. The communication officer worked his console. Channel open, Captain. Vasquez stood and straightened her uniform when she spoke. Her voice was calm and clear, transmitted across the void to every ship in the system. Kefir vessels, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the human battleship Prometheus. The Velen cluster is now under human protection. You will withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed." She paused, letting the words sink in. "This is your only warning." The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge. Every officer knew what they were facing. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission. In the distance, the Kethver swarm began to move. Commander Vrix had received the transmission. He had listened to it twice, certain he had misunderstood. One ship, one tiny ship, demanding that the Kethver withdraw. It was so absurd that he almost respect. The 30 Kethver raiders never stood a chance. The Prometheus moved with a speed that should have been impossible for a ship its size. One moment it was stationary, a target waiting to be destroyed. The next moment it was among them, its weapons blazing with a fury that turned the void into fire. The first raider exploded before it could even fire a shot. The second followed a heartbeat later. The Prometheus twisted between them like a dancer, its guns tracking multiple targets at once with perfect precision. Kethver pilots, who had hunted across 100 worlds, found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and dying before they could understand what was happening. Commander Vrix watched from his hive carrier with growing disbelief. The battle was supposed to last minutes. It lasted seconds. 30 ships reduced to 30 clouds of debris, scattered across the void like leaves in a storm. What? Scath could not finish the question. He had never seen anything like this. None of them had. Vrix forced himself to think clearly. One ship had destroyed 30 raiders in less than a minute, but it was still one ship. The Kethver had faced powerful enemies before. They had won through numbers, through overwhelming force, through the simple mathematics of the swarm. "All ships," he commanded, his voice steady despite the cold feeling spreading through his thorax. "Attack formation. Destroy that vessel." 400 Kethver warships surged forward. On the Prometheus, Captain Vasquez watched them come. Her face showed no fear, only concentration. This was the moment humanity had prepared for. This was why they had hidden, why they had built, why they had waited. "Captain," Commander Chen said quietly, "400 ships. Even for us, I know the odds." "Commander," Vasquez's voice was calm. "We're not here to destroy them all. We're here to break them." Chen nodded slowly. He understood. The Kethver had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. They had never been challenged, never been stopped, never been hurt in a way that mattered. Today that would change. "All hands," Vasquez announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. The Kethver are coming. They think we're one ship against an army. They think we're prey. Let's show them what humans are made of." The bridge crew worked in focused silence. Each of them knew their role. Each of them trusted the ship and each other. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. The Kethver swarm approached like a wave of darkness, hundreds of ships spreading across the void. Their weapons charged. Their commanders clicked orders. They would overwhelm this strange human vessel with sheer numbers, tear it apart with concentrated fire, and continue their harvest of the Velen cluster. That was the plan, at least. The Prometheus did not wait for them to attack. It dove straight into the heart of the swarm, moving with a speed and precision that defied belief. Kethver ships tried to target it, but it was never where they expected. Their shots crossed empty space while the human vessel danced between them, striking again and again. Vasquez had studied the Kethver for years. She knew their tactics, their psychology, their weaknesses. They fought as a swarm, controlled by commanders in the hive carriers. Kill the hive carriers, and the rest would fall into confusion. "Target the command ships," she ordered. "Ignore the small ones." The Prometheus changed course, cutting through the swarm toward the nearest hive carrier. Raiders tried to block its path. They died. Destroyers moved to intercept. They died too. Nothing the Kethver threw at the human ship could slow it down. The first hive carrier exploded in a cascade of fire. Immediately, the ships under its command began to scatter, their coordination broken. Without the hive-mind connection, individual Kethver pilots had to think for themselves. Most of them had never needed to do that before. Vrix watched a second hive carrier die, then a third. His swarm was in chaos. Ships collided with each other in their confusion. Others fired wildly, hitting their own allies as often as the enemy. The perfect unity of the Kethver swarm had shattered like glass. "How is this possible?" Sketh asked, his voice trembling. How can one ship do this? Vrix had no answer. He had fought across the galaxy for a century. He had broken fleets and conquered worlds. But he had never faced anything like this human vessel. It moved like it knew what the Kefir would do before they did it. Its weapons cut through their hulls as if their armor was paper. Every tactic, every strategy, every trick he tried was countered before it could work. For the first time in his long life, Commander Vrix felt afraid. The battle raged for 2 hours. 2 hours of fire and death, of exploding ships and desperate maneuvers. The Prometheus took damage. Its shields flickered under concentrated fire. Armor plating was torn away. Systems failed and were quickly repaired. But it kept fighting, kept killing, kept breaking the Kefir swarm apart piece by piece. By the end, more than 300 Kefir ships were destroyed. The remaining 80, including Vrix's damaged hive carrier, were in full retreat. They had never retreated before. In 3 centuries of conquest, the Kefir had never run from a fight. They ran now. Governor Tessic of Velen Prime watched the battle from his office window. He could see the flashes of light in the distant sky, the brief stars that marked dying ships. He had prepared himself for death. He had sent his daughter away on one of the last evacuation transports, though she had begged to stay with him. He had written his final messages and made his peace. He had not prepared for victory. When the Kefir began to retreat, he did not believe it at first. He checked the sensors again and again, certain there was some mistake. But the readings were clear. The swarm was fleeing. The Velen cluster was saved. How? He whispered. Who saved us? The answer came in the form of a transmission, broadcast on all frequencies. A human voice, tired but triumphant. Velen cluster, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the human battleship Prometheus. The Kefir threat has been neutralized. You are safe? Tessic sank into his chair, tears streaming down his face. Around the planet, 40 billion souls looked up at the sky and wept with relief and wonder. They had been saved by a species most of them had never heard of. From a corner of the galaxy most of them could not find on a map. The humans had come, and everything had changed. In the hidden station of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Yellen watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. Around her, delegates from a dozen species shared her disbelief. They had seen the Kefir destroy everything in their path for generations. They had seen the mightiest fleets of the Concord broken like toys. And now they had seen one human ship tear the swarm apart. This is impossible, the Morthian delegate said. One ship cannot defeat 400. It violates every principle of warfare. And yet it happened, Yellen replied quietly. We watched it happen. Where did they come from? The Pelian representative asked. The humans were supposed to be primitives, isolationists. How do they have technology like this? No one had an answer. The humans had hidden themselves away for decades, declining all contact with the wider galaxy. Everyone had assumed they were weak, afraid, unable to compete with the advanced civilizations around them. Now it seemed that assumption had been terribly wrong. Yellen made a decision. Open a channel to the Prometheus. I need to speak with their captain. It took several minutes to establish contact. When the connection finally went through, Yellen found herself looking at a human woman with short dark hair and tired eyes. There was blood on her uniform and burns on her hands, but she held herself with quiet dignity. Ambassador Yellen, Captain Vasquez said, I've heard of you. The Soroth are known for their wisdom, and humanity was known for its isolation. Yellen replied, It seems we were wrong about many things, Captain. On behalf of the Galactic Concord, I must ask, where did you come from? Why did you intervene? And she hesitated, almost afraid to ask, Are there more of you? Vasquez smiled slightly. It was a strange expression, somewhere between pride and sadness. Those are complicated questions, Ambassador. Perhaps we should discuss them in person. I think the galaxy deserves some answers. That would be appreciated, Captain. But I must ask one thing first. The Kefir. They retreated, but they are not destroyed. They will regroup. They will return. What happens then? Vasquez's expression hardened. The Kefir will not threaten the Velen cluster again. They will not threaten anyone again. Humanity will see to that. How can you be certain? Because, Ambassador, the Prometheus is not alone. We have been watching the galaxy for a very long time. We have been preparing. And now that we have stepped out of the shadows, Vasquez paused, choosing her words carefully. Let's just say the Kefir are about to learn what happens when they wake a sleeping giant. The communication ended, leaving Yellen with more questions than answers. Around her, the Concord delegates erupted in confused discussion. Some were hopeful, others were frightened. If the humans had hidden this much power, what else had they hidden? Were they truly saviors, or simply another threat wearing a friendlier face? Yellen did not know, but she intended to find out. Far from Velen, the remnants of the Kefir swarm gathered in the darkness between stars. Only 80 ships remained from the original 400. 80 ships, and a commander who had never known defeat until today. Vrix floated in his command chamber, his body aching from injuries sustained when his hive carrier was nearly destroyed. Around him, the Serve Captain Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Concorde with her hands clasped behind her. Back, the chamber was vast, filled with representatives from every surviving civilization in known space. Hundreds of eyes, in shapes and colors she had never imagined, all focused on her. Some looked at her with hope, others with suspicion, a few with naked fear. She understood. Humanity had hidden itself away for generations. Now they had emerged with power that no one had expected, and power always made people nervous. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Ambassador Yellen, Vasquez began. I know you have questions. I will answer as many as I can. Yellen nodded from her position at the central podium. The Concorde appreciates your willingness to speak with us, Captain. But I must be direct. The galaxy has watched the Kefir consume civilization after civilization for 300 years. No force has been able to stop them. And then, without warning, a single human ship appears and defeats their swarm. We need to understand what is happening. I'll tell you what I can. Vasquez took a deep breath. Humanity has been watching the galaxy for a long time. We saw the wars, the conquests, the endless cycle of civilizations rising and falling. We saw species destroy each other over territory, or ideology, or simple greed. And we made a choice. What choice? Asked the Morthian delegate. To stay out of it. To remain hidden. To build our strength in silence while the galaxy tore itself apart. Vasquez's voice was steady. We knew that eventually, something would threaten us. Either a conqueror would come to our space, or the chaos would spread until it reached our borders. So we prepared. Prepared how? Yellen pressed. The reports say your ship possesses technology far beyond anything in Concorde records. Weapons that can destroy Kefir vessels with single shots. Engines that allow movement patterns we cannot even understand. How is this possible? We had time, Vasquez said simply. While the rest of the galaxy fought, we researched. While empires rose and fell, we experimented. While the Kefir consumed world after world, we built. 100 years of focused development, with no wars to drain our resources and no politics to slow our progress. Silence filled the chamber. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. 100 years of uninterrupted advancement. They tried to imagine what their own civilizations could have achieved, without the constant conflicts that plagued galactic society. Why reveal yourselves now? Yellen asked. The Kefir were not yet a threat to your space. They would have been eventually. Vasquez met the ambassador's eyes. The Kefir don't stop. They can't stop. Their entire society is built around consumption and expansion. In 50 years, maybe 100, they would have reached our borders. We chose to meet them on our terms, in a place of our choosing, before they grew any stronger. And now, the question came from a small amphibian delegate near the back of the chamber. Now that you have revealed your strength, what do you intend to do with it? This was the question Vasquez had been waiting for. She could see the fear behind it, the worry that humanity was simply another predator, hiding its claws until the moment was right. We intend to protect, she said clearly. Ourselves first. That has always been our priority. But we've learned something in our years of watching the galaxy. Isolation isn't enough. Eventually, the darkness finds you no matter where you hide. The only real safety is a galaxy where predators like the Kefir cannot thrive. You speak of safety, the Morthian delegate rumbled, but you also speak of power. Power enough to destroy the Kefir swarm. What stops you from using that power against us? Nothing. Vasquez's honesty seemed to surprise them. Nothing stops us. We could conquer if we wanted to. We could become the next Kefir, consuming weaker civilizations and building an empire on their bones. We have the ships, the weapons, the technology. She paused, letting the words sink in. But that's not why we built our strength. We built it to protect ourselves. We built it because we were afraid. And we've learned something important about fear. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. Fear can make you a monster if you let it. We could have become the thing we feared. Instead, we chose to become something else. And what is that? Yellen asked softly. A shield, Vasquez said. Not a sword of conquest, but a shield against the darkness. The Kefir will not threaten your worlds again. We will make sure of it. How? The Pelion representative's voice was skeptical. You have one ship. The Kefir will rebuild. They will come back with thousands. One ship is all you've seen. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. The Prometheus is not alone. Even now, human vessels are taking position throughout Concord space. Not to conquer or threaten, but to watch, to wait. And if the Kefir return, she let the sentence hang in the air. How many ships? Yellen asked carefully. Enough, Vasquez replied. More than enough. The discussions continued for hours. Questions about human society, human government, human intentions. Vasquez answered what she could and admitted when she could not say more. Trust would take time. She understood that. After generations of hiding, humanity could not expect the galaxy to embrace them overnight. But it was a start. Far from the Concord chamber, the surviving Kefir fleet hid in the darkness between stars. Commander Vrix had chosen this location carefully. It was far from any inhabited system, surrounded by sensor-blocking dust clouds. A perfect place to recover and rebuild. Or so he had thought. Commander, Sketh's voice was tense. Sensors detect a ship approaching. Vrix's compound eyes narrowed. A ship, one ship. Yes, Commander. It matches the profile of the human vessel from Velen, the one called Prometheus. Cold fear gripped Vrix's thorax, but he forced it down. Just one ship. We still have 80 vessels. Damaged, yes, but still capable of fighting. This time we will be prepared. Commander, there's more. Sketh's mandibles clicked nervously. Our scouts report human vessels appearing at the edges of 12 different systems. Not attacking, just watching. 12 systems. 12 human ships, at least. And if each of them was as powerful as the Prometheus. Vrix pushed the thought away. The Kefir were survivors. They adapted. They overcame. They would find a way. Battle formation, he ordered. All ships prepare to engage. The Kefir fleet arranged itself around Vrix's hive carrier. Damaged ships moved to the back. Those with functioning weapons took the front. They were wounded and weary, but they were still the Kefir. They would not go quietly. The Prometheus emerged from fold space, exactly where their sensors had predicted. Captain Vasquez's voice echoed through their communication systems. Commander Vrix, we know you're here. We know you're planning to rebuild and return. I'm here to tell you that won't be happening. Vrix opened a response channel. One ship against 80. You were lucky before. You will not be lucky again. I'm not here to fight, Commander. There was something strange in the human's voice. Something that sounded almost like pity. I'm here to deliver a message. What message? The galaxy is changing. The days of the Kefir swarm are over. You can no longer consume civilizations and move on. Every path you could take is being watched. Every system you could target is being protected. Vrix's mandibles clicked with anger. You cannot guard the entire galaxy. No one has that power. We don't need to guard the entire galaxy. We only need to guard it against you. Vasquez's voice hardened. Look at your sensors, Commander. Really look. Vrix turned to the tactical display. At first, he saw only the Prometheus and the sensor-blocking dust clouds around them. Then the display updated as his officers adjusted the settings. His blood ran cold. Ships, human ships, emerging from the dust clouds in every direction. Not one or two, but dozens. They had been there the whole time, hidden, waiting, watching the Kefir gather like prey that had wandered into a trap. 43 vessels, Sketh whispered. Commander, they have 43 vessels. 43 human ships against 80 damaged Kefir. And if each human ship was as powerful as the Prometheus, you can fight, Vasquez continued. You might even destroy a few of our ships. But you will lose, Commander. You will all die here in the darkness, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed." Vrix said nothing. His mind raced, calculating odds, weighing options. The Kefir had never surrendered. In 300 years, they had never even considered it. But they had also never faced a situation like this. Or, Vasquez said, and her voice softened slightly, "You can choose to survive. Survive." The word felt strange in Vrix's mouth. The Kefir survive by consuming. It is what we are. It's what you've been. It doesn't have to be what you will be. Species can change, Commander. Even yours. You expect us to become prey? To huddle on some planet and wait for death? I expect you to adapt, Vasquez replied. Isn't that what the Kefir have always done? You consume because that's how you survived in the past. But the past is over. The galaxy has a new reality. And in this reality, the Kefir cannot continue as they have been. Vrix stared at the sensor display. 43 ships. And somewhere beyond this system, more ships were watching other Kefir remnants. Humanity had them surrounded. Not just here, but everywhere. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The Kefir had surrendered. Not just retreated, not just paused in their consumption, but actually surrendered. 300 years of unstoppable expansion had ended in a conversation between a human captain and a Kefir commander somewhere in the darkness between stars. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Yellen tried to maintain order as delegates shouted over each other. The chamber had erupted into chaos the moment the reports were confirmed. "This is a trick," the Morthian delegate bellowed. "The Kefir do not surrender. They are planning something. Perhaps they simply recognized a superior force," the Pelian representative suggested. "The humans have demonstrated power beyond anything we've seen, which makes the humans the new threat." Someone else shouted. "They have broken the Kefir. What stops them from breaking us?" Yellen raised her hand for silence. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down, but eventually the delegates stopped their arguments and turned their attention to her. "We have all seen the same reports," she said calmly. "The Kefir fleet has stood down. Human vessels are escorting them to a designated system where they will begin. A transition. A transition to what?" the amphibian delegate asked. "To a new way of living, apparently." Yellen's voice was carefully neutral. "The humans have proposed helping the Kefir establish permanent settlements, teaching them to grow food instead of hunting it, showing them how to exist without consuming other species." "Impossible," the Morthian declared. "The Kefir biology requires constant consumption. They cannot simply stop being what they are." The humans seem to think otherwise. Yellen pulled up a display showing technical data that had been shared by Captain Vasquez. "They have studied Kefir biology for decades. They believe the consumption behavior is partly cultural, not entirely biological. With proper food sources and adjusted social structures, the Kefir could potentially survive without hunting sentient species." "And if they're wrong?" someone asked. "If the Kefir cannot change, what then?" Yellen had no answer for that. No one did. In a remote star system far from Concord space, the first stages of the Kefir transition were beginning. Commander Vrix stood on the surface of a barren world, watching human engineers set up strange equipment. His warriors surrounded him, their compound eyes taking in everything with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. This planet had no name. It was a rocky ball orbiting a yellow star, with thin atmosphere and no existing life. The humans had chosen it specifically because it was empty. A blank canvas, they called it, where the Kefir could build something new. Admiral Elena Vasquez walked beside Vrix, pointing out different structures as they were assembled. She had been promoted after the Battle of Velen, given command of the entire human fleet in Concord space, but she had insisted on overseeing the Kefir transition personally. "The atmospheric processors will take about 6 months to make the air breathable for your species," she explained. "In the meantime, you'll live in the habitat domes we're constructing." "Habitat domes," Vrix repeated. The words felt strange. The Kefir have never lived in fixed structures. There's a first time for everything. Vasquez gestured toward a large building, taking shape near the planet's equator. "That will be your first agricultural facility. We've identified several plant species from your original homeworld that can be grown here. High protein content, fast growth cycle. They should provide sufficient nutrition without the need to hunt. You know of our homeworld. Vrix's compound eyes widened slightly. We consumed it long ago. Before any living Kefir was born, we found records, fragments from species you consumed over the centuries. Some of them had studied your origins before you reached them. Vasquez's voice was matter of fact, but Vrix could sense something beneath the words. Not anger, exactly, but a deep awareness of what the Kefir had done. You must hate us, Vrix said quietly. We have killed billions, destroyed civilizations, yet you offer us mercy instead of death. Why? Vasquez stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes, so strange and singular compared to his compound vision, held a complexity he was only beginning to understand. Because mercy is harder than death, she said. Anyone can destroy an enemy. It takes strength to transform them into something better. But why should you care what we become? We are monsters. Your own galaxy would celebrate our extinction, perhaps, but we would know what we had done. Vasquez resumed walking, and Vrix followed. Humanity spent generations preparing for war. We built weapons that could crack planets. We designed ships that could move faster than light itself. We created enough firepower to sterilize every Kefir world in existence. She paused, looking up at the stars. And then we asked ourselves what we would become if we used that power. Would we be protectors, or just another kind of predator, killing because we could? She shook her head. We built our strength out of fear of becoming victims. But we realized the greater fear should be becoming the thing we built weapons to fight. Vrix considered her words carefully. The concept was strange to him. The Kefir had never worried about what they were becoming. They simply were what they were, and they did what they did. The idea of choosing to be something different, of restraining power out of moral concern, was almost incomprehensible. And yet, here he stood on a new world, being offered a chance to survive. Not because the humans were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose mercy. I do not understand you, Admiral, Vrix admitted. But I think perhaps my species needs to learn to understand. Vasquez smiled slightly. That's a start. Back in the Concord, the debates continued. Some species wanted to join humanity's protection network immediately. Others feared becoming dependent on human power. A few demanded that the humans withdraw from Concord space entirely. Ambassador Yellen worked tirelessly to maintain stability. She held private meetings with human diplomats, trying to understand their intentions. She negotiated agreements for information sharing and mutual defense. She managed the fears of Concord members while also managing their hopes. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of negotiations, she found herself alone with Admiral Vasquez via HoloLink. Can I ask you something directly, Admiral? Yellen said. Of course. Why didn't you destroy the Kefir entirely? Yellen's voice was soft, but there was genuine confusion behind it. They killed billions of sentient beings. They destroyed civilizations that can never be rebuilt. By any measure of justice, they deserve extinction. Justice, Vasquez seemed to weigh the word. Yes, perhaps by some measures they do. But extinction is forever, Ambassador. Once a species is gone, they can never come back. They can never change, never grow, never become something different. Some would say that's exactly the point. Some would. Vasquez nodded slowly. But we've learned something in our years of watching the galaxy. The cycle of violence never ends on its own. Species destroy each other, and the survivors become the new destroyers. The Kefir were once prey, did you know that? Before they became the swarm, they were hunted nearly to extinction by another species. They became what they are because they had to survive. That doesn't excuse what they did. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. And it suggests that they could become something else, if given the chance. Vasquez's expression grew serious. We could have killed them all, Ambassador. We had the power. But then what? Another species would eventually fill the void. Another predator would rise, and the cycle would continue. We're trying to break the cycle, not just win this round of it. Yellen sat with that for a long moment. And if you fail, if the Kefir cannot change, then we will deal with that when it happens. But we have to try. Vasquez's voice hardened slightly. We didn't build our fleet to become executioners. We built it to give the galaxy a choice, a chance to be something other than what it has been. A bold vision, Yellen admitted. We're a bold species, Vasquez smiled. Or so we keep telling ourselves on the Kefir settlement world. The first crops were beginning to grow. Vrix walked through the agricultural dome, watching young Kefir workers tend to the strange plants. They moved awkwardly, their bodies designed for hunting, not farming. But they were learning. Slowly, painfully, they were learning. Skef approached him, mandibles clicking with a mixture of frustration and something that might have been hope. The human instructors say the first harvest will be ready in 3 weeks, Skef reported. They believe it will produce enough to feed 2,000 of our people. 2,000. Vrix considered the number. We have 10,000 warriors in this settlement alone. The humans are building more domes. They say within a year, we will be self-sufficient. Skef paused, his compound eyes studying Vrix carefully. Commander, do you think this will work? Can we truly become something other than what we have always been? Vrix looked around at the growing plants, at the habitat domes rising in the distance, at the strange new world that was becoming home. I do not know, he admitted. The Kefir have never tried to be anything but hunters. But we have also never faced extinction before. We have never been forced to adapt in such a fundamental way. Some of the warriors talk of rebellion, Skef said quietly. They want to fight, to return to the old ways. I know, Vrix's voice was tired. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Velen. The galaxy was a different place now. Not perfect, not peaceful in every corner, but different. The shadow of the Kefir swarm no longer hung over every inhabited world. Ships traveled trade routes that had been too dangerous for generations. Civilizations that had spent centuries preparing for annihilation were learning to plan for futures instead. Ambassador Yellen of the Soroth stood in the grand hall of the newly constructed Galactic Assembly. It was larger than the old Concord Chamber, built to hold representatives from many more species. The Concord had been a desperate alliance of survivors. The assembly was something new, something built on hope rather than fear. Human delegates sat among the gathered representatives, no longer strange visitors, but accepted members of galactic society. Admiral Elena Vasquez, now retired from active command, served as humanity's senior diplomat. Her hair had turned gray in the years since Velen, but her eyes held the same quiet strength they always had. Today was a historic occasion. The Kefir were petitioning for provisional membership in the assembly. Commander Vrix stood at the central podium. He had aged too, his chitin growing darker, and his movements slower than they had been. But he held himself with a dignity that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Behind him stood Skef, now his chief advisor, and a dozen other Kefir representatives. Members of the Galactic Assembly, Vrix began, his voice clicking through the translation systems. I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a supplicant. The Kefir request the opportunity to prove we have changed. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Despite 5 years of peace, many still feared and hated the Kefir. Memories of destroyed worlds and consumed civilizations did not fade easily. For 3 centuries, my species was a plague upon the galaxy, Vrix continued. We consumed without thought. We destroyed without mercy. We believed that strength meant taking everything we could, regardless of the suffering we caused. He paused, his compound eyes sweeping across the gathered delegates. We were wrong. The humans taught us this, not through words alone, but through their example. They possessed the power to destroy us utterly. They chose instead to offer us a chance at redemption. That choice, that mercy, showed us a different kind of strength, Vrix gestured, and images appeared on the chamber's display screens. Kefir settlements, now spanning 3 worlds, agricultural facilities, schools, medical centers, young Kefir learning trades that had nothing to do with hunting or war. In 5 years, we have established permanent colonies for our people. We grow our food instead of hunting it. Our population is stable, no longer driven by the need to expand endlessly. We have not attacked a single inhabited world since the day we surrendered to Admiral Vasquez. Words and images are easy, the Morthian delegate interrupted. How do we know this is real? How do we trust a species that killed billions? Vrix turned to face the Morthian directly. You cannot trust us, not yet. Trust must be earned, and we have much to earn. That is why we ask only for provisional membership. We do not expect acceptance. We ask only for the opportunity to demonstrate, over years and decades, that we have truly changed. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some delegates spoke in favor of giving the Kethfer a chance. Others argued that the risk was too great, that the Kethfer could never truly change their nature. Old wounds were reopened, old grief expressed. Through it all, Admiral Vasquez sat in silence, watching. Finally, when the arguments had run their course, Yellen called for a vote. The Assembly's decision would determine whether the Kethfer would have a path toward acceptance, or whether they would remain permanently excluded from galactic society. The vote was close, closer than many had expected. But when the final tally was announced, the Kethfer had been granted provisional membership by a margin of 7 votes. Vrix bowed his head, overwhelmed by an emotion he had no Kethfer word for. Gratitude, perhaps, relief, hope. After the session ended, Vasquez approached him in the hall outside the chamber. "Congratulations, Commander," she said. "It's a beginning, a beginning." Yes, Vrix studied her with his compound eyes, but also an ending. The ending of what we were. Is that difficult? Letting go of the old ways? Vrix considered the question carefully. Difficult, yes. The old ways were all we knew. They defined us for 300 years, but they were also destroying us, even before your people intervened. We were consuming the galaxy, but we were also consuming ourselves. Our population grew and grew, but our society had no depth, no meaning beyond the next hunt. We were empty, Admiral. We just did not know it. Vasquez nodded slowly. I've wondered sometimes if we made the right choice, offering you mercy instead of extinction. Some would say we should have ended the threat permanently. And what do you say? Vasquez looked out the window at the stars beyond. I say that extinction is forever. Change is not. If we had destroyed you, we would never have known what you could become. Now we have the chance to find out. And if we fail, if my people cannot truly change, then at least we will have tried. At least we will not have committed genocide without giving your species a chance. Vasquez turned back to face him. That matters, Commander. Not just for you, but for us. For who we want to be as a species. Vrix was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. When I first met you, Admiral, I thought humans were strange. You had power but refused to use it for conquest. You offered mercy to enemies who deserved death. You spoke of choosing who to be, as if identity was something that could be decided rather than simply accepted. And now I understand. Or I am beginning to. Vrix made a gesture that might have been the Kethfer equivalent of a smile. The Kethfer spent 3 centuries becoming monsters because we believed we had no choice. The humans showed us that there is always a choice. You showed us that strength does not mean domination, that power does not require cruelty. We're not perfect, Commander. Humanity has made plenty of mistakes, perhaps, but you are trying to be better, and that trying, that effort to become something worthy of your power, that is what we are learning from you. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. 2 species that had been enemies, now joined in a fragile experiment of redemption and hope. On the Kethfer settlement worlds, life continued to change. Young Kethfer who had never known the hunt grew up learning different values. They studied agriculture and engineering, medicine and art. They built things instead of destroying them. They created instead of consumed. It was not easy. Old instincts did not disappear overnight. There were conflicts, struggles, moments when the old violence threatened to resurface. But each time, the new generation pushed back. Each time, they chose the difficult path of change over the easy path of regression. Sketh, now old and approaching the end of his life, often visited the schools where young Kethfer learned their new trades. He watched them work with plants and machines, with ideas and dreams that had nothing to do with hunting. Do you think they will remember? He asked Vrix one day, as they observed a class learning to repair agricultural equipment. The young ones, do you think they will remember what we were? They will remember, Vrix replied. We will make sure of it, not to glorify the old ways, but to understand why we must never return to them. The memory of what we were will help them appreciate what they are becoming. And what are they becoming? Vrix watched a young Kethfer carefully adjust a piece of machinery, her concentration complete, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction when she got it right. Something new, he said softly. Something we could never have imagined. Something the galaxy never thought possible. He paused, remembering the day the human battleship had first appeared on their sensors. The fear he had felt, the certainty that his world was about to change forever. The humans came with the power to end us, he continued. They chose instead to offer a beginning. And now, 5 years later, our children are building the future we never dreamed was possible. Skef nodded slowly. Perhaps that is the greatest victory of all. Not the battles we won, but the future we did not destroy. They stood together in the warm light of the settlement dome, two old warriors watching young lives unfold. Above them, the stars continued their endless dance. Human ships patrolled the borders, but no longer as guardians against Kefir aggression. Now they were simply ships, part of a fleet that protected all the Assembly's members. Kefir vessels had begun to join that fleet, crewed by a new generation that understood protection rather than predation. The galaxy was not at peace. There were still conflicts, still dangers, still work to be done. But the shadow of the swarm had lifted. The endless hunger that had consumed civilizations for 3 centuries had finally found another way. And in the hearts of a species that had once been monsters, something new was growing. Something that looked a lot like hope. The humans had come with the power to end them. They chose instead to offer a beginning. And the Kefir, against all odds and all expectations, had chosen to accept it. That choice, that mutual decision to be better than what had come before,